Hello, dear viewers. Support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it. And also, make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. It seems a lot of interesting happenings are now inside the north. So I said to my dear daughter here that we should visit the north and see for ourselves, said Oberyn, nudging his daughter forward, who executed a perfect curtsy. I find myself quite surprised to see you this far north, Prince Oberyn. I believe this is the first time a Prince of Dorne has ever visited Winterfell, said Eddard, looking down from his seat at the high table at the small Dornish party assembled inside his hall. Eddard frowned thoughtfully as he looked at the daughter of the Red Viper. The girl, unlike her father and other Dornish people, has pale white skin rather than olive skin, but her other traits were similar to the rest of the Dornish party, like black hair and dark eyes. Now, he has heard of rumors about the famed paramour of the Red Viper. Some rumors he has heard from the South paint her as some sort of foreign witch who has ensnared the Red Viper, but he could not see how this woman was foreign when she looked so much alike to the rest of the Dornish. If there was anyone with foreign looks among the Dornish, then it'd be the Red Viper's daughter, Nimriia Sand. Nonetheless, he acknowledged them both with a respectful nod as they graced him with a curtsy. My daughter, Nimriia Sand, and my paramour, Alleria Sand, Oberyn introduced. I was not aware the Seven Kingdoms have a law that prohibits me travel unannounced, Lord Stark. Oberyn challenged. You speak true, but it is considered polite to do so. We could have prepared to receive you properly, Eddard said through gritted teeth. I know your intentions in traveling through the north unannounced, Prince Oberyn. I think if one wants to truly know a place, it's better to travel unannounced, said Oberyn, a cheeky smile adorning his face. Many moons of planning between Jon Hoster and himself had gone down the drain that day, all because of that monster Tywin. It was their fervent wish to capture the Mad King alive and put the monster on trial with the whole Seven Kingdoms watching. They could have shown once and for all the sheer madness and raving lunatic that hid behind the skin of the last Targaryen monarch. They could have taken Princess Aelia and her children as prisoners and forced an oath of abdication. They could have even repeated the feat with Queen Rhaella paving the way for a legitimate ascension for Robert. Eddard felt a headache coming. Although the spies he had found so far seemed to have no connection to Dorne, he could not help but worry. The Dornish people were not exactly trustworthy, especially those who lived further south. Treachery and subterfuge were in the blood of a Dornishman. Especially someone like Oberyn Martell. He could see that in the man's dark eyes. There are also ample reasons for House Martell to hold a grudge against his family. Even if he had nothing to do with it, he was still accountable for the deaths of Elia Martell and her children. To this day, their butchered bodies haunted him, and he blamed himself for not taking the heads of those monsters with ice. No matter the consequences, give Prince Oberyn and his company bread and salt, Eddard ordered. Instead, they were left with the threat of another war in the future, when Viserys Targaryen sails across the Narrow Sea to stake his claim on the Iron Throne. It'll be like the Blackfire rebellions all over again, leaving a festering wound that bleed Westeros from time to time. No doubt, when Viserys Targaryen gets ready for an invasion, there will be lords from the Crownlands reach in Dorne to support his claim. He watched the Prince of Dorne accept the guest rites, gracefully followed by others in the prince's company, but he won't be leaving them out of his sight. His eyes strayed to Jory and discreetly signaled for the young knight to come closer. My lord, keep watch on Prince Oberyn and his companions. Wherever they go, one of our men must follow. I want to know whom they talk to, and if possible, what they are talking about under my roof, he ordered inconspicuously. As you will, my lord. Jory nodded. Prince Oberyn, the servants will lead you and your companions to the guest quarters. We'll try to make your stay in Winterfell as comfortable as possible, given the circumstances, said Eddard. Thank you, Lord Stark. Your north is far colder than I imagined, but Winterfell is as warm as a new lover. I look forward to meeting you and the rest of your family after a warm bath, said Oberyn, before being led away by the servants of Winterfell. Call for Maester Luwin. I'm in need of his advice, Eddard ordered, sinking back in his seat as he pondered the reasons for the Red Viper's visit. Oberyn stared at the tall monolithic structure in awe. The astronomy tower The servants of Winterfell called it. He was quite sure Lord Stark had warned his people against him. But as always, they all underestimated the power of a woman like Illyria. An offer of some wine and a few sensual looks and touches was all it took for Illyria to ensnare the servants and guards of Winterfell. For their loose tongue, it was safe to say Illyria's efforts were not in vain. He came to know that there were a bunch of archmaesters holed up in this astronomy tower discussing, studying, and verifying some of Harry Stark's inventions and findings. The exact nature of those inventions or findings remained a mystery. That's why he was going to find out what those gray-robed old cunts were up to in this magnificent tower. There is not even a slight blemish in the structure, Father. I have only seen this level of smoothness in one place. Nimriia trailed off, running her fingers over the smooth surface of the tower. The famed Valyrian architecture method of fusing stone and mortar into one, leaving one smooth surface. It seems the free cities of Essos and the castle of Dragonstone are not the only places in the world that can boast such architecture. Oberyn mused out loud, "Maybe we should step inside the tower and find out." "I don't think I can take this cold for too long, my love," said Illyria, shivering like a leaf in the wind, despite being wrapped by a thick woolen cloak. Oberyn was also of the same opinion. The castle and the rooms it offered were warmed, warding off the biting cold of the north, but they were no longer inside the warmed halls of the castle. They were standing at the base of the astronomy tower that was supposedly constructed by Harry Stark overnight with the might of his magic. It sounded like a tale straight out of the Age of Heroes, and Oberyn was quite interested to learn the truth of the matter. He was not the only one. His daughter Nimriia was also interested in learning more about the magic of Harry Stark that rivals even the feats of dragon lords of old Valyria. Her interest in this Harry Stark was quite understandable. After all, Valyria and its legacies run strong in her blood from her mother's side. Either Eddard Stark is more of an open person with none of the prejudices against Dorne, or the man is a careless fool, Oberyn thought as he climbed a flight of stairs that led to the many levels of the tower. The guards standing guard over the tower did not object to their entry as Oberyn had thought. There was a total of 5 levels to the tower. On each level, they'd search for the maesters and Harry Stark, but they found those levels deserted. It was only on the 5th and final level they found their targets. The 5th level was one wide expanse, with a lot of open spaces shielded from the outside by large colorful glass panes and curtains. In this large expanse, Oberyn found a small section where the maesters of the citadel were gathered around a small child. As he crept closer toward the maesters, he could hear snippets of the conversation that was going on. "You mean to tell us that you managed to measure the size of our world with magic?" Oberyn heard one of the maesters ask the Stark boy. His eyes widened when the boy answered with an emphatic yes. "How?" Oberyn asked, at the same time as the maester did, earning several curious looks from the maesters and a simple raised eyebrow from the Stark boy. "I didn't know you were an academically inclined man, Prince Oberyn," said Harry, eyeing the Prince of Dorne curiously. "If he wasn't so taken with his less-than-savory activities, he'd have made a good maester." "Prince Oberyn was a student in the Citadel, a good one as well," said Archmaester Garmot. "I see. Well, I considered the planet as a perfect circle, which it is not. Then I had the length of a sail on a ship at White Harbor measured. When the ship sailed away from the port, I used my magic to measure the distance between my position and the topmost point of the sail as it disappeared on the horizon. Once I had that distance, I merely used simple geometry to construct a right-angled triangle and find the radius of the planet using the sides and the hypotenuse." "I'll just show you," said Harry Stark, a little bit flustered before drawing a circle on the floor. Oberyn just stared dumbly at Harry Stark before he looked at the maesters to see whether they understood all that, but he found them similarly lost. Oberyn's eyes widened as he watched the Stark boy draw a perfect red circle using a piece of wood. While standing, he gaped openly as the Harry Stark drew a right-angled triangle by extruding a line from one arbitrary point from the circle. One corner of the triangle was at the center of the circle, connected to the arbitrary point in a straight line. The third corner was where the height of the sail was measured. All of these details were written down on the floor, and Oberyn noticed the maesters were taking careful notes. He was not exactly a scholar when it comes to the measures of shapes. He was aware the Citadel taught the subject, but his interests lay in the body of men and the substances that kills them and saves them. But going by the look on the faces of the maesters, whatever the Stark boy was showing looked to be authentic. However, one detail did bother him. "How did you measure the distance from your position to the ship?" asked Oberyn, as measuring that distance seemed to be an impossible task. After all, how can someone measure the distance from land to a ship sailing away in the sea? "Oh, that's quite easy," said Haryon Stark, pointing the stick toward Oberyn. "It is beautiful," Nimriia whispered, reaching out with her hand to touch the green line. Her hand just passed through the green thread as if it was never there. Oberyn blinked, and in the next moment there was a long green line stretching from the tip of the stick to his heart. There was even a numerical figure written on the far end of the green line, denoting the distance. For once, the rumors were true after all. You are the Stark, whose magic has taken Essos and Westeros by storm. Well met, young Stark. Oberyn offered his hand to the young lad who shook it with a grin. "Well met. I'm Haryon Stark." "I'm Oberyn Martell," he introduced himself before pointing to his daughter and paramour, "my daughter Nimriia Sand, and my paramour Illyria Sand. Rob and I just celebrated our 9th name's day a few days back," said Haryon, holding a steady gaze with Nimriia. "How old are you?" asked Nimriia, her dark eyes glimmering in a way that Oberyn was quite familiar with. "You don't sound like or behave like a 9 names days old child," said Nimriia, a more sensual aura manifesting around her. "I've been told that many times by most people." Haryon shrugged. "Really? How about we—" "Nimriia," Oberyn warned. "You are no fun," Nimriia said to her father before turning her dark eyes on Haryon. "Maybe when you gain a few more names days, you can seek me out in Dorne." "What?" His daughter pouted for interrupting her fun. "You are not in Dorne or one of the free cities. Keep that in mind," Oberyn warned. "Dipsupfats." He looked between the two and wondered to himself, who's the more mature one between the two? Oberyn's eyebrows rose in surprise as Haryon Stark shook with laughter while his daughter was blushing up a storm. The day was pleasant and warm. The usual frigid air of the north was pulling back a little bit, or maybe he was also taken in by the weather-changing charms of Winterfell's Godswood. The unicorns of Skane preferred a warm climate, and he provided them with the comfort they needed in return for their cooperation. But now it was time to relocate them from the confines of the Godswood. Winterfell's Godswood has always been a temporary arrangement anyway. The plan has always been for the unicorns to have a safe haven in Sea Dragon Point where he can easily allot them a larger grazing area without much trouble. Since the area has also not seen large human settlements, allotting and warding off a separate plot of land for the unicorns would be an easy affair. "These unicorns, why don't they like men?" asked Oberyn. Harry eyed the Prince of Dorne out of the corner of his eyes as they watched the unicorns being led into the airship by the Valkyrie. Men are disagreeable creatures, while women are more agreeable. Speaking in a broad sense, these unicorns are needy babies who want to be pampered and serve their every whim, said Harry, earning some disgruntled sounds from the passing unicorns. So, they prefer the company of women. It's not that they dislike men, they just prefer the companionship of females. They feel more comfortable in the presence of women, Harry answered, which means they dislike men. Why? Oberyn pressed on as if the notion that the unicorns preferred female company somehow offended the man. Harry eyed the Red Viper and the maesters who were busy looking and prodding at the airship. Then he looked at the guards discreetly spying on the activities of these people. His father has ample reasons to distrust these people, but the wards have so far not acted against any of them. The maesters have been suitably impressed by the limited amount of magic he has shown them so far, and the various discoveries he had made to this day, but those discoveries paled in comparison to his airship. At least, that was the position the maesters of the Citadel were taking. They were adamant to study the airship, and that's why he agreed to let them board the airship. He didn't even mind their insistence on studying the runes he used on the airship. It's not like all the runes he used were visible to the maesters' eyes. The maesters and their interests were understandable, but he was far more cautious when it comes to the Red Viper. According to Garland Tyrell, Prince Oberyn is a dangerous fellow who has crippled Willis Tyrell, an attorney. That particular story was not exactly proof of any hostile intentions from Prince Oberyn, as Harry thought tourneys were generally a risky sport. "Why are you here?" Harry asked, staring hard at the Red Viper, cutting straight to the chase instead of dancing around. "Do not play dumb with me," Prince Oberyn, you might think of me as an impressionable child, but I'm not naive. There is a reason why you are here in Winterfell, and I'd like to know that reason, Harry said, his eyes gaining a sharpness that took Oberyn back. Is that how you treat someone who helped you gain an additional 1 million gold dragons from the Lannisters? Oberyn asked silkily. What do you mean? Your story of swindling the Lannisters, while impressive, holds not much value to me. Now tell me the real reason behind your visit, else I'll have to bar you from visiting Avalon in my airship, Harry threatened. I seriously doubt that. I took permission from your father for this little trip. My father is a good man, but a flawed man nonetheless. He tries to see the best in other people, which blinds him from the true nature of most men. Oh. Then tell me, Harry Stark, what virtue is there in choosing the side that has killed an unarmed woman and her 2 children in cold blood? Oberyn hissed. Agreed. It was not our best moment, and we did refuse to send troops to aid the Mad King and Rhaegar until we were threatened with Elia and her children. None, Harry agreed, but he was not easily bowing out when he was getting under the Red Viper's skin, but I'm sure you'll agree there was also no virtue in fighting for the side of a murderous mad lunatic and a rapist who kept my aunt prisoner in Dorne of all places. Granted. So now that it is out of the way, tell me the true reason for your visit, Prince Oberyn, Harry implored. Your magic and your wealth can sustain the Lannisters and their hold on the Iron Throne. House Martell cannot let something like that happen. So, I'm here assessing you and your magic to see whether it'd pose a threat. Harry became thoughtful for a moment. Here was an opportunity that conveniently fell into his lap. He had plans, grand plans that require friendly ports in the south. Not to mention his half-brother was sort of a backup plan if things go sour in King's Landing. For now, the Baratheon dynasty that sits on the Iron Throne was to his advantage. But as the issue with the High Septon has proven that goodwill can come crashing down, should the secrets behind Jon's parentage be somehow revealed, he thought having a friendly ear in Dorne could be advantageous. Say that I'm sympathetic to your righteous cause of seeking justice for your sister and her children. What do you expect from me? Harry knew his questions sort of took the Red Viper by surprise. Even he was a little hesitant to step into this path that inevitably lead him to the great game, as Maester Luwin refers to court politics. Besides, it was only a matter of time before the game sought him out at some point. It is better this way. I'll be seeking out the great game, and I'll be deciding whom I'm playing against. Not the other way around. Next, Stannis stared into the fire that was burning in the fireplace with his steely blue eyes. His daughter barely survived the Greyscale, but she was not untouched. The deadly disease has scarred his daughter's cheek with its scale. For now, his daughter survives. But all the maesters he had summoned from the Citadel predict that his daughter may not live long enough to enjoy life to the fullest. He cursed the gods for saddling him with tragedy and insults one after the other. Have I not been a dutiful brother, always obeying his elder without complaint? Have I not served my king loyally despite the insults he heaps on me? Have I not served the gods and the 7 kingdoms dutifully by upholding the laws of gods and men? Have I not always acted selflessly and without discrimination? Then why is my daughter suffering? These were the questions that were haunting him day and night. He was a hard man and an unamusing man. If he took Robert's description, hard or unamusing he might be, but he has always treated others the same way he treated himself. He had done so because he knew the perversions of power and the sin that it incurs on the soul. He had seen how cruel the world can be, and he thought it was his solemn duty to be someone who stands for justice above everything else. The gods safeguard those who hold justice and duty above all in their hearts. Those were the final words of his father before that ill-begotten journey to Essos. Since that day, he had lived by those words. And yet, here he was, helplessly watching his poor daughter fight for her life with the most dangerous disease known to man. He had fallen in love with his child the moment his daughter opened her small blue eyes to look at him. It was a long time since he had felt warmth in his heart, and it was because of his daughter. To learn that the cause of that warmth can be snuffed away was unbearable for him. Milord, pardon me if this sounds silly. If the maesters are saying their medicine is not strong enough, why not use other methods? Stannis pulled his eyes away from the fireplace to stare at his trusted onion knife. Other methods? He asked with a frown. Hey, my lord. The Stark boy of Winterfell cured the spring sickness of White Harbor and Braavosi coastlands with his magical medicine. Sailors of Narrow Sea speaks of an undying star that sits atop the Sept of Snows in White Harbor. Supposedly, it is a gift from Lord Stark's eldest son. The Stark boy is the talk among Braavosi merchants, and I'm sure you have heard the rumors in King's Landing as well. The second coming of Brandon the Builder, they say. Some say the boy is Garth Greenhand reborn. You'd ask me to act on tales of drunken sailors and rumors coming from small folk, Stannis thundered. Me lord, you saw the magic of King Robert's God's grief. Surely there is no harm in trying. 'Tis for the good of your daughter, is it not? Shouldn't we try all that we can to keep her safe? Asked Ser Davos. Stannis let out a sigh and tiredly leaned back in his seat. Nonetheless, he took Davos' suggestion to heart. After all, what was the harm in trying? Do you know what it cost us to save face among our allies and save ourselves from the hole you nicely dug up for our family? Kevin asked, looking at his monumentally ignorant niece once they were inside the safety of her chambers. Do not presume to take that tone with me, uncle. I'm the queen, Cersei hissed back, her green eyes alight with defiance. Yes, you are the queen. Then act like one, instead of behaving like a court jester. What exactly were you thinking when you decided it'd be a brilliant idea to turn the High Septon against the Starks? I don't have to explain myself to the likes of you. Cersei turned up her nose. The likes of me? Kevin said slowly, his eyes gaining a sharpness to them that previously lacked as he towered over his niece. Do you think you have some power over me because you married Robert Baratheon? I am the... Yes, you are the queen. He smoothly cut off his niece. What you refuse to see, dear niece, is that you can be unmade queen. Just as easily if we don't have the support of our allies. Your husband holds the Iron Throne, not because of his prowess, but because of the support of his allies. Robert holds the Iron Throne because of father. Cersei snottily replied, Did your father fight at the Trident or in the Stormlands or at the Battle of Bells? No, the North, the Stormlands, the Vale of Arryn, and the Riverlands fought those wars to seat your husband on the Iron Throne. They can unseat him just as easily should they withdraw support. Then they'll be branded traitors and I'll have their heads on a spike. Kevin eyed his niece for a long moment, wondering how she could be so stupid. With what army? He asked incredulously. The Crown Lands, the Reach, and Dorne are keeping their heads down because if they rebel, they'll have to face the combined might of the Westerlands, Stormlands, Riverlands, Vale, and North. Should the North rebel, Riverlands won't join us, and it is more than likely the Knights of the Vale stay neutral. Do you not see the danger you court by alienating our allies? Then what are you saying, uncle? That I've no say in my daughter's future? I'll not let you or father use my daughter for your petty schemes. Cersei said defiantly. Did your father ask for your opinion before deciding on your marriage? No. Then don't expect you can overreach Tywin in this. He is wroth with your stunts, Cersei, and the only reason he has spared you from retribution is that you carry his name and blood. But don't think you can cross him again without consequences, Kevin warned, knowing well that Tywin's wrath won't dissipate even for his daughter. Cersei continued to scream and fling threats at him, making Kevin rub his temples. He lamented at the fact that Cersei seemed to have taken leave of her senses, and for the life of him, he could not figure out why she was being unreasonable when it comes to the Starks. It was not as if any Stark has crossed his niece to incur such strong opinions to take root in her mind, nor did he think she was particularly a religious person to have strong opinions about the Stark boy's magic. Kevin left his niece alone to stew in her chambers after delivering a direct missive from Tywin. He had said all he could to convey Tywin's displeasure to Cersei. It was now her choice to behave or invite the wrath of his brother with her pettiness and stupidity. He supposed Tywin would be less forgiving after he reports Cersei's response to his brother's warnings. That was not taking into account the next meeting he was about to conduct with Jon Arryn. Undoubtedly, the hand was cross with the drama that has unfolded in the capital. For now, he could alleviate Lord Arryn's concerns about the faith as he managed to come to an accord with the High Septon. When he finally reached the small council chambers, he was greeted by the sight of several Val knights standing guard outside the door. One of the guards quickly checked with the hand before giving him entry. Lord Arryn, he nodded in greeting at the aging Lord of the Eyrie. There was another man beside Lord Aaron whom he was unfamiliar with. "Lord Kevin, this is Lord Petyr Baelish, the Master of Coin." "Well met." He nodded at the shorter man, but otherwise remained disinterested. "Go, Lord Baelish. I must have a quick word with Sir Kevin." Kevin followed Lord Aaron and accepted the offered seat, while the older man sat across from him. So, Jon Arryn looked imploringly at him. "The issue has been dealt with. The High Septon shall recall his edict regarding Harrion Stark with no damages done. The proclamation will be sent to all the septs across the 7 kingdoms as fast as possible," said Kevin. "That's good to hear, although I wouldn't claim there are no damages done," Jon Arryn said gravely. As Lord Stark raised his concerns with the king, Kevin tentatively asked, praying such a thing has not happened. He had spent quite a sum of gold to keep the High Septon away from anything related to the Starks for the foreseeable future, and Jon Arryn, bless his soul, had carefully kept the king ignorant of Cersei's hand in this unfortunate matter. Should King Robert somehow come to realize his best friend's son is being vilified on the orders of Cersei, the consequences would strain the present relations between the crown and House Lannister. Tywin was already pissed at him for not anticipating the ploy by the Martells at the auction, and he didn't want his brother's wrath directed at him or any member of his family. No, he has not. I've not told him of the Queen's involvement yet, but once the issue is properly resolved, I shall convey the truth. Kevin didn't like that, but Lord Aaron was conveniently leaving it open for negotiations, which was a good sign. Perhaps more trade concessions in favor of Crownland merchants should suffice to buy the old Falcon's silence. "Then what damages are you talking about?" Kevin asked. "It seemed Prince Oberyn Martell paid a visit to Winterfell," said Jon tentatively. Kevin could already feel a headache settling in. The Red Viper has been the cause of much discomfort for Kevin as of late. "What has the man done?" he asked dejectedly. It seemed the Red Viper has managed to woo the Starks to let him stay at the newly constructed castle of Avalon, and even take Harrion Stark as a student. Kevin eyed the Lord of the Eyrie incomprehensibly for a moment, before his mind registered the important details. "Oh no, this couldn't possibly get any more troublesome." Kevin whimpered, thinking of the possible ramifications that could emerge out of this unholy development. First, it was the Tyrells who somehow managed to foster a child of their blood in Winterfell. Now, the Martells managed to seamlessly wiggle in, somehow, at the most crucial moment, into the good graces of Lord Eddard. I was certainly not finished. Sir Kevin, it also seems Lord Eddard has come across a bunch of spies in his lands that are in service of some Westerlanders. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you, Sir Kevin? Asked Jon Arryn, directing an entirely disapproving frown on the aged face of the Lord of the Eyrie at Kevin. He was shocked to learn that their budding spy network that was formed by Tywin was busted in Winterfell before it could properly set in. The only relief on his part was that he was not the one overseeing the progression of the spy network. After the fiasco of the Greyjoys burning their fleet, the need for a more robust spy network was all but apparent. Tywin had charged Tyget to oversee the development of the spy network, and it seemed his younger brother has somehow not taken adequate precautions. These spies have nothing to do with House Lannister. Maybe, but Eddard thinks otherwise. Convey my disappointment to Lord Tywin on this matter. Sir Kevin, spying on allies just when we are healing the fissures that exist between the 7 kingdoms is not at all helping the king's peace. I hope Lord Tywin take corrective action promptly. To Kevin, the last bit came more as a command rather than a request. At that moment, he could see the judging eyes of the old falcon bearing down on him from an unseen height. Yes, promptly, Kevin muttered, knowing full well that Tywin was not going to be happy at all. He doubted his brother's recent good mood with the acquisition of Lionclaw was going to last. The Archmaesters were floored to see his self-made castle in Avalon. It was also safe to say they were suitably blown away by the airship as well. The maesters inspected the ship and his castle for weeks, looking for any tangible process working behind his magic. Without his fullest cooperation, the maesters remained entirely ignorant of his secrets, which is how he preferred things be for the moment. However, he was getting tired of playing ignorant of the workings of his magic, and was getting positively annoyed by the persistent nature of the maesters. They won't leave you alone. They are like sharks in an ocean. Once they smell blood, they won't leave. I warned you these gray rats are trouble, lad. You did not listen. said the specter of Archmaester Marwyn, waggling his finger at Harry's face. "They'll suck you dry of everything they want to know, and then they'll plot in their dark halls devising your demise." Harry just shrugged and went back to reading some of the findings of the Citadel when it comes to astronomy. The faith often spoke of the 7 wanderers in the sky, signifying each of the 7 gods of the Andal faith. The Citadel claims the Andal faith took their findings and incorporated them into the faith. Some fiercely contested such claims, mostly Septons and those close to the faith. But the fact that 2 of these supposed wanderers were found by his telescope to be moons of other planets did not sit well with the maesters. To be fair, they were not personally antagonistic, but rather seeing his discovery was going to ruffle the feathers of many holding positions of power in the faith. The world as the faith envisions has their planet at the center and the 7 wanderers which represent the 7 orbiting around their planet. Well, that worldview was going to get challenged in the South. It was also going to be incredibly difficult to present the discoveries in the Citadel and expect them to take it all in without some pushback. Archmaester Gorman had already pointed this out in his pitch for seeking a telescope of his design to the Citadel. He had flat out said no because he didn't want some bunch of muggles taking his stuff away from his home. When he added a little white lie about the devices of his design stop working without his close proximity, finally did the trick and let Archmaester Gorman stop hounding him about the telescopes. The Myrish lens tube in Maester Luwin's possession was no match for the telescopes he designed. Nonetheless, the device has been in use for centuries, and the Citadel have all but made it a doctrine to accept the 7 wanderers in the sky through several books written over the years. That authority was going to get challenged, but his telescopes helped identify the many constellations that could be seen in a clear night sky was indisputable. His telescopes have confirmed and provided more clarity on the existence of constellations like So, Crone's Lantern, Moonmaid, Shadowcat, and some other locally discovered constellations. It had also unveiled some more constellations not easily seen in the night sky like the Great Swirl or the Axe. "You know, I'm surprised Lord Eddard even allowed you to take the Red Viper into your service," said Marwyn. "Oh, he was not happy at all when I suggested I want Oberyn Martell to stay a bit longer in the north. He was even more disagreeable when I said I wanted to study under the Red Viper and even train the Valkyrie. But somehow you managed to convince Lord Eddard." "That's impressive," Marwyn said. "But credit should go to my mother," Harry shrugged. "Really? Lady Stark wanted Oberyn Martell to stay and train you?" Marwyn asked, incredulously. "Oh yes, once she learned Jory caught those spies the Lannisters sent, she was quite furious, so once she learned of my plans, she convinced my father to allow Prince Oberyn to stay for as long as he wanted. I believe she called it sending a proper message to Casterly Rock." "Interesting," Marwyn muttered, looking deep in thought. Harry eyed the Archmaester out of the corner of his eyes. He could see the gears turning behind the man's eyes. Undoubtedly, a man as well versed in the politics of the 7 kingdoms, Marwyn was rearranging the board, so to speak, as lines were being redrawn. Fissures were coming in between the allied houses that unseated the dragons from the Iron Throne. It was not just between House Stark and Lannister. There was an ongoing struggle that was quietly rearing up between Riverlands and the North. Harry had been reviving the vitality of the farmlands in the north with his magic. He had done so within the lands controlled by Houses Stark and Manderly. And last week he repeated the feat in Deepwood Motte. The sheer yield of potatoes, cabbage, peaches, and pineapple near Deepwood Motte earned him a lifelong friend in Galbart Glover and Rabat Glover. The Glover brothers were rough people, but they were strong adherents to the old gods, which sort of earned him more respect and, dare he say it, worship from the 2 brothers. Those 2 were convinced his magic was a sign from the old gods that the magical bloodlines and abilities are returning to the First Men houses. The 2 Glovers were not wrong in that aspect, as Harry also noticed some signs supporting their theory. Anyways, with 3 major houses of the north gaining fertile farmlands and the mountain clans gaining their own far early, has increased the availability of food stocks in the north. With the increase in local grain and crop yield, the dependence on merchants from Riverlands was dropping day by day. Northern houses and merchants were now buying from northern farmers rather than outside sources, which earned the average farmer a good profit. This has left the Riverlanders in a bit of a bind, as their stocks were no longer in high demand, at least not at the exorbitant prices they have demanded in the past. All foreign merchants were now forced to sell their crops and grain at much lower prices than they were used to if they wanted their wares sold in the north. Harry gave 2 years before the Riverland merchants stopped looking at the North as a lucrative market for their wares. He had been in touch with Lord Manderley to purchase seeds and saplings of fruits and trees alien to the North. With his magic, he could reshape the climatic conditions for crops and fruit trees to flourish, giving an edge to northern farmers. Exactly how that'd play out between the North and the Riverlands would be interesting to see in the coming years. Harry turned sharply towards the door as he heard someone knocking. "I shall take my leave, young Harryend. The longer these maesters stay with you, the more they piece together what they want. Send them away from your castle and keep them away from anything that has to do with magic." With that final piece of advice said, Marwyn's spectral form collapsed, leaving Harry alone in his study. "Come in," he said, hearing more knocking on his door. He waved his wand, allowing the magically locked door to swing open. It was none other than Nimriia Sand at the other end of the door. "You called for me, my lord." Nimriia gave an exaggerated bow. Harry scoffed at her antics. Ever since he has been allowed to sort of govern Avalon by his father, Nimriia has been addressing him as Lord. She was trying her hand at determining what would get under his skin. He'd expect nothing less from the daughter of the Red Viper. "I need something from you." "Is it my virginity, my lord?" How can a fair maiden be asked to part with her purity, even if it is being asked by the fair lord of this castle? Nimriia gasped, acting like a damsel in distress. Harry rolled his eyes at her crass thoughts. For some reason, Nimriia was confident that he'd understand all these sexual references and insinuations she uses in their conversations. It was as if she forgets that he was a child. He remains one biologically, but he was anything but a child in his mind. But that was neither here nor there. "No, stupid. I just want a pinch of your blood," said Harry, a little bit annoyed. "Oh, okay." Nimriia shrugged and offered her arm, making Harry raise his eyebrows.
"Just like that?"
"You are not at all concerned. I am going to use your blood for some nefarious purpose," he asked, with a raised eyebrow. Nimriia shrugged her shoulders before sitting down on a nearby chair. "Are you?" she asked, looking curiously at him. "No, I'm just fascinated by your ancestry. You are a product of the Rhoynar and Valyrian bloodline. I'm just curious whether your blood holds something that can tickle my magical senses." Harry lied. In reality, he wanted her blood to study the effects of poison resistance Oberyn talked about in one of his lessons. The man claimed he was training his daughters to resist many poisons, so he just wanted to confirm and study the effects in Nimriia's blood. Studying the combination of Rhoynar and Valyrian blood came as an added benefit. "Then sure, take my blood. I trust you," said Nimriia, offering her hands once again. Harry happily pricked a small pinch of blood from her thumb using a needle. Immediately, he set up the magnifier and put the blood sample under observation. Harry hummed, as the magic in the magnifier began analyzing the platelets of Nimriia's blood. He could see slight discoloration around the edges of the individual cells, which indicated traces of poisonous substances. Turning on more magical sensors, he divined more characteristics of Nimriia's blood. The results were fascinating, to say the least. Harry found her blood to have some distinct magical properties. The magnifier lens was showing some quality readings when he looked for magical properties. While Harry was focused on Nimriia's blood, his guest was wandering around his study without his oversight. When Harry finally took his eyes away from the magnifier, he was stunned to see Nimriia in possession of a very familiar carpet. "This looks nice," said Nimriia, unruffling the colorful carpet on the floor and standing on it before Harry could warn her. "Ah!" A shrill scream came out of Nimriia's mouth as the magical carpet zoomed out of the window of Harry's study before he could do anything, carrying a thoroughly frightened daughter of Prince Oberyn. Harry ran near the window and observed as Nimriia was now holding on to the carpet for dear life, shouting and screaming obscenities at him as she zoomed around in the sky. "Yeah, she definitely has some magical potential," Harry muttered, craning his neck to the side as the carpet jerked to the side and took a curve around the tower before disappearing from his line of sight. Harry laughed before returning to his work table, unbothered by the screams of Nimriia Sand. The carpet was merely a prototype he designed to test out his repository of charms that he was planning to use on brooms. There were spells on the carpet that would direct the carpet back into its original place, and there was a plethora of safety charms used, which should keep Nimriia safe. "She'll come back in one piece, eventually," he thought, letting out a chuckle. Matter of fact, Harry even came up with a nice alias right on spot for his Dornish friend. The Flying Sand. Harry smirked, paying no heed to the threats and begging Nimriia was throwing at him outside his tower. On the other hand, he was sure those maesters were going to hound him about the flying carpet. He was planning to test it out after the maesters were sent away to Old Town. Oh, well, I'll just have to send him away by more forceful means. Harry ducked and backpedaled as quickly as a cat, avoiding the jabs and swings of Nimriia's attempts to tap him with her spear. Calling the piece of wood in Nimriia's hand a spear would be an insult to all proper spears out in the world. The butt ends of this particular spear were blunted to soften the blow. For training purposes, this was more than enough in Harry's opinion, considering the safety features were more for his benefit. While he was satisfied with keeping weapons training as less dangerous as possible, Nimriia was not at all happy with the restrictions. Ever since she got taken on a flight around Avalon on that flying carpet, she was trying her best to get back at him. She was embarrassed before the castle as she screamed her throat out in fright, and she hated the nickname Harry bestowed upon her. "Oh look, the sands are flying," Harry snarked, earning a frothing look of contempt from his training partner who was covered in sand from head to toe, thanks to Nimriia trying too hard to get him with that stick of hers. "Okay, that's enough, Nimriia. Make the switch. Harrion, you are on the offensive while Nimriia defends." Oberyn ordered from the sidelines. Nimriia let out a frustrated growl at her inability to touch him. "You cannot possibly be this good with a few weeks of training," Nimriia groused as she took hold of her spear with both hands while setting herself in a defensive position. Harry agreed with that assessment. It had only been barely a month since he entered the tutelage of Prince Oberyn. There was no way he could have possibly outperformed Nimriia, who trained for years under the Red Viper. But when you have access to magic, the scope of impossible things tends to shrink, and that's exactly what happened in his case. He was no super prodigy when it comes to handling weapons. He never needed to handle melee weapons in all his years, barring that brief stint with stabbing the sword of Gryffindor through the basilisk's mouth in his second year at Hogwarts. But he wouldn't characterize that particular event as evidence of his non-existent sword skill. He was sort of blindly stabbing at the snake, and it was a big-ass snake. The sword was bound to hit somewhere despite his lack of skill in handling a weapon like the sword of Gryffindor. Right now, he was enjoying superiority in the training yard, all thanks to a little ritual he designed to increase his physical prowess. Technically speaking, it was not a complete ritual. It was a combination of ritual and potions. The ritual he had undergone would strengthen his muscles and bones as he grows faster than normally possible. And there was a potion regimen that complemented the ritual that increases his speed and reaction time. The potion was a lucky find as he was mostly experimenting with the roots of asphodel he nicked from Skane with the powdered roots of a heart tree. It turns out that the potion made with the two powdered roots enhances the nervous system within the body, which made him wonder about the magical properties of the sip from a heart tree. But that was for another day. Harry spun the spear in his hand, kicking up the loose sand against Nimriia as a distraction before he went on an all-out offensive. It was quite exhilarating, really. He could feel the blood pumping through his veins at an unprecedented rate as he danced around the training yard, taking quick, sharp jabs at Nimriia. "Slow down, Arian. The whole point of the training is to make your body endure more strain and familiarize yourself with the techniques," said Oberyn. Now that's disappointing, Harry thought as he slowed down to a more suitable pace. First, you must train again and again with different techniques so that these techniques are ingrained in your mind and the body. Speed will come naturally after you can execute these techniques flawlessly. Now, wield your spear more slowly. Harry didn't disobey the advice of Prince Oberyn. He had assumed the Red Viper was more knowledgeable in weapons training. He went slowly through the techniques with the spear as he attacked, while Nimriia defended herself from his assault. There was hardly any strain felt on his body as he jabbed and smacked, testing Nimriia's defenses. The ritual seems to have worked wonders on his body, allowing him to endure more strain than normally possible. The only caveat was that he had to take the potion every full moon so that the effect lasts for a month. For now, keeping the ritual's benefits permanent was out of his grasp. But it won't be long before he comes across a solution to that particular problem. He always does, just like he found a way to have those masters flee from Avalon. All it required was some imaginative use of Confundus charms and illusions to have those gray-robed men flee his home, and the North like their lives depended on it. All it took was to conjure some illusions of ghosts and convince the masters their lives were in danger. The resulting fallout was amusing, if nothing else. He was sure the Citadel would get some frantic reports about the ghost of Brandon the Builder haunting the north. Harry blinked in surprise, stopping his thoughts as his spear stopped dead in its tracks as it connected with Nimriia's right shoulder. In this dance of spears, he had sidetracked and paid less attention to the yard in favor of his internal musings. And yet, he managed to score a hit on Nimriia, who was 7 years his senior. He took in the disheveled and out-of-breath Nimriia and realized she was at her last legs, as far as stamina was concerned, while Harry felt like he could run a marathon without breaking a sweat. That's gassed. Not possible. Nimriia breathed out, trying her best to regain her composure as she held onto her spear to stand upright. Harry recovered from his shock and struck up an arrogant pose that projected confidence. "We Starks are made of tough stuff. It was only a matter of time before I surpassed you in the field," Harry said, arrogantly looking down on Nimriia, further infuriating the Sand Snake. "Why, you little..." Nimriia growled. "Daughter, what have I told you about losing your composure in a bout?" Oberyn asked, moving close to Nimriia and Harry. "Not to," Nimriia growled. "Is that all?" Oberyn raised an eyebrow. "No," she groaned, huffing a bit and standing straight as she regained her composure. "Always be the one to provoke, but never get provoked." "Yes. Now take some time to cool off and regain your composure. Find where you failed and train more to correct that mistake." Harry watched Nimriia leave the training yard to take a break. "Your improvement is truly baffling. In a few days, you seem to have made a significant leap in stamina and speed. That's impressive for someone your age." Oberyn, observe. "As I said, we Starks are made of tough stuff," Harry said with a shrug. We'll be the judge of that," Oberyn said before calling on his 3 Valkyrie and having them train with Harry one after the other. It was safe to say his limits were truly put to a test.
"But you were rare. I'd so great."
"The castle looks beautiful from this vantage point," said Oberyn, looking at the castle of Avalon from the boat he was sitting. Harry was also in agreement. The darkness that fell on his castle only emphasized the light supplied by the oil lamps burning all around the castle. "Yeah, it looks beautiful," Harry agreed before focusing on the task at hand. He was fishing in the dark, a hobby he picked up from Prince Oberyn. Unsurprisingly, the Red Viper took his interest in fishing and turned it into a training exercise, and that's why he was fishing under the cover of the night. Oberyn reached out and slapped the back of his head. "Ow! Close your eyes and focus," Oberyn said sharply. "I should have known better," Harry growled before going back to closing his eyes and focusing his mind on the fishing pole. "You should have learned to let go of impulsive actions. One day, it'll save your life," said Oberyn. "I suppose that's as good advice as any," Harry thought. Harry just wanted to fish to pass time. It was not as if he could spend all his time in a day on training and looking over the different construction works that were happening around the castle. More and more people were arriving at Avalon each day to take up residence. Some came out of the prospect of a new start, while others were lured by his reputation as a blessed soul, or by his lucrative promises. From early on, Harry knew he needed to attract more people in his own way to establish a thriving port rather than depend on the goodwill of the neighboring northern lords. To that end, he charged some of the minimal support of men his father gave him and used them as messengers. He had them sent away with a horse and provisions to spread the word in every squalor about the abundant jobs and lucrative offers like assured food rations until these people land a job in Avalon. He also managed to arrange some heart-to-heart conversations with the merchant-class citizens of the North. He offered them access to grapes for a new budding wine-making industry, and he offered to store grains in Avalon free of cost to speed up the migration of the workforce. One of the major functions of a castle was to store grain and other crops that get collected from the peasants and then get bartered to the merchant class for a price. But the merchants won't be taking out the grain the moment they buy out the stocks. Instead, the grain and crops remain safely stored in the castle and methodically get released to the merchants over time. For this service, the lords charge a fee for the number of days the grain is stored in their castles. It also has the added advantage of diverting essential supplies to the whim of the lords and landed knights in the case of long winters, famines, and floods. If more merchants came to Avalon, it also increased the flow of more peasants that depend on these merchants. There is also his reputation as the green hand to consider. It was well known in the North that he can increase the yield of any farmlands with his magic. Undoubtedly, his reputation would ensure more people would seek out his lands, if nothing else, for food security. The fishing pole in his hand slightly shook, alerting Harry that the bait was getting due attention. He waited patiently, noting every slight tremor that he sensed from the pole. At the right time, he pulled the pole back sharply, depositing a flailing fish on the deck of the boat. "Nicely done, now again," said Oberyn, patting his shoulder, making Harry sigh. He was really starting to hate fishing. The next morning, Harry was sitting inside his solar with Oberyn and Veon Poole. The steward of Winterfell was loaned out to Avalon to set up the new household staff, and also to keep watch over Oberyn, while his father has given his blessings for Oberyn to stay at Avalon. That doesn't mean the Red Viper was trusted completely. "We have nearly cleared the path through the Wolf's Wood. Once Lord Glover sends some additional men, we can complete the path far early than we expected. I'm also happy to report that the mountain clans have started supplying us with paving stones. The paving has already started from the King's Road and will progress through the Wolf's Wood as planned," Veon Poole reported. "The stones are up to standard scale?" Harry inquired. "We have men working on ensuring the dimensions are kept uniform as agreed upon. It's impressive that you have managed to act promptly. I'd not have expected for the construction to be sped up this fast," Oberyn commented, his feet on the table while peeling off an apple with a small knife. "'Tis no secret that Avalon is going to develop a port and house a fleet on its shores. The small folk are moving from all across the north to work in the building of the fleet and perhaps to become a sailor in those ships. The airship has also been a tremendous help in transporting paving stones from the northern mountains and near Winterfell," said Veon Poole. Harry supposed the airship must have been a huge advantage when it comes to shortening the transportation time, as well as cutting the expenses. Fewer people working on transporting the stones means more people working on mining the stones for the roads. The many assorted safety charms he added to the airship that also increased the maneuverability of the airship made it easier to fly, even for a novice like Veon Poole. The man was certainly skilled when it comes to logistics, and any management role which was a rare quality in itself. "Have there been any new developments in Winterfell that I should be aware of?" Harry asked, leaning forward in interest as he had not visited Winterfell for weeks. With his usual chores of entertaining the Archmasters, training with Prince Oberyn, and his experimentation with potions and rituals, he was a little bit busier than usual. The airship was also otherwise engaged in speeding up the transportation of workers and building materials. "Well, the news is not yet made public by Lord Stark, but Lady Catelyn is with child. Maester Lewin confirmed it yesterday." "Congratulations are in order, then." "Please extend my hearty well wishes to Lord Eddard and Lady Catelyn," said Oberyn. "I shall convey your well wishes, Prince Oberyn." Veon Poole nodded appreciatively. It seems they did forego their fight and made up," Harry thought, knowing well that it must have taken quite a lot of energy on his father's side to mellow out his mother. "There is also another matter," said Veon Poole, eyeing Prince Oberyn warily. "Oh, do go on," Harry prodded. "A raven came from Dragonstone. Lord Stannis' daughter, Shireen, has been afflicted with Greyscale. After much effort from some of the brightest maesters of the Citadel, the child survives. For now, Lord Stannis has come to know of your magic and how you developed a cure for the spring sickness. He has requested Lord Stark whether it'll be possible for your magic to cure his daughter." Harry was immediately interested in the prospect of making his attempt at taking on Greyscale a magical malady, as some maesters classify the infectious skin disease. There was no known cure for Greyscale, except for a surgical procedure that rarely ever worked. Ever since he got access to Rhoynar blood, he had been devouring any and all tales related to the old Rhoynar principalities of Essos. It was truly a sad tale as far as the Rhoynar were concerned. They seemed like a thriving community of water magicians that got enslaved and wiped out by clashing with the Valyrians. It was a popular story of how Prince Garin the Great assembled a massive army to resist the Valyrian freehold's expansionism, but Prince Garin's army was laid waste by the Dragon Lords of Valyria, and in return, Garin was supposed to have unleashed a curse that drowned his enemies. It is claimed that many of the victors of Valyria and Volantis fell prey to Greyscale after decimating the Rhoynar army. If this Greyscale was indeed a magical malady, then he was quite interested in trying his hand at finding a cure. He could even experiment with the malady and see how it behaves against a Rhoynar descendant's blood. If it was indeed a blood curse, he wanted to see whether it'd spare infecting one with Rhoynar descent. It'd be a nice magical exploration, and he could also get access to Dragonstone, the ancient seat of Targaryens. There were bound to be some mysteries remaining unearthed in the old castle that could prove beneficial for Harry in the long run. He was still woefully ignorant of the fire dragons of the world, and he'd really appreciate some relevant information on the subject before he hatches the egg. It remains to be seen whether something useful remains at Dragonstone after all these years. As Marwyn alleged, it might be possible that the maesters swept the castle for anything important during the reign of Aegon III. The Dragonbane was supposedly so broken and fearful of dragons that he allowed the maesters to purge the knowledge of dragons in his early reign, which robbed House Targaryen of their ability to hatch their last remaining dragon eggs. This was the tale spun by Marwyn. He'd see for himself whether this tale holds any merit. "It's only a month and a half away from the next auction, is it not?" Harry mused aloud. "That's correct." Vayon nodded. I think I can accommodate curing the affliction that is plaguing Lord Stannis' daughter before the auction," Harry said, after thinking it over in his mind. It'd be a tight schedule, taking into account the development of Avalon planned in the coming months, especially when he was expecting the arrival of builders promised by Lord Manderley for building the port facilities and ships. "I don't think Lord Eddard is keen on letting you come in contact with Greyscale. That accursed disease has struck down many men since its conception. There is no cure for Greyscale," said Vayon Poole, looking a little green, perhaps, thinking about Greyscale. I like to cure incurable diseases. This Greyscale sounds like an interesting challenge. I think I'll have a word with my father on the subject," Harry said, turning his attention to Oberyn on a dime. "So, how about it? Up for a visit to Dragonstone?" "Are you serious?" Oberyn asked incredulously, a sentiment that was shared by Vayon Poole as well, going by the steward's eyebrows disappearing into his hairline. "Oh yeah, it'll be fun. A wolf, snake, and a stag in the lair of a dragon. What could go wrong?" "Absolutely not. I don't care if even the gods old and new are standing by your side. You'll not be going to Dragonstone and throwing away your life trying to cure Greyscale of all things." Harry cringed as he took the full wrath of his lady mother after he pitched his plan of going to Dragonstone and curing Lord Stannis' daughter. "But no means no Harryan, and that's the end of it." Catelyn growled at him before kicking him out of her chambers. Harry came face to face with an amused Luwin standing dutifully outside his mother's chamber. "I warned you, didn't I?" Yes, you did, Maester Luwin. Come, walk with me," Harry said, leading the maester out of his mother's earshot. "Has father changed his mind?" "Sure. I think not, young Harry, and it's more than likely it never will," said Maester Luwin. I can't have that," said Harry, his eyes suddenly gaining a shine. "That's why you'll be convincing him otherwise. You'll be speaking in my favor to my father, and extolling all the good that comes out of curing Greyscale." Maester Luwin was now looking at Harry with complete bewilderment. "Why would you even think I'll endorse such a thing to Lord Stark?" Maester Luwin asked incredulously. "Are you not a man of higher learning and an accomplished healer, Maester Luwin? Do you not want to see a proper and safe cure eradicate this scourge of flesh from our world?" Harry asked. He could see the old Maester waver slightly. "Yes, but if you had dismissed my claims of finding a cure to the spring sickness, what would have happened? So many lives could have been lost." "Isn't it so?" "Yes, but..." Once again, Harry interrupted the maester. "Think how many lives I could save by finding a cure for Greyscale. Think of Lord Stannis' daughter and what I can do for her if I can visit Dragonstone." If Maester Luwin was moved by his appeal, the old maester was trying hard to conceal it. Greyscale is a dangerous affliction. Even dragon lords of Valyria have fallen to the infectious disease. "I will not fall victim to the disease," Harry interjected, looking confidently into Maester Luwin's eyes. "I will take precautions. Magical precautions. Besides, I'll not be alone. Archmaester Marwyn will be joining me at Dragonstone." "Archmaester Marwyn?" Maester Luwin asked, looking perplexed. "How did..." "The Archmaester's Raven will arrive at Winterfell in a few moons, explaining everything. So, are you going to help me out or not?" said Harry, looking expectantly at Maester Luwin, who finally sighed and nodded his head in agreement. "Luwin is in my pocket. Now the uphill battle to convince the Lord of Winterfell begins," he thought. With that happy thought, Harry skipped down the hallway, looking for his siblings. The better part of the day had been spent arguing unsuccessfully with his father and then his mother about the merits of his visit to Dragonstone. Both of his parents shot him down rather firmly, denying him permission. No matter what arguments he presented, all of them were outright rejected, and he was told an emphatic no. He was now more than sure he'd have to use some healthy doses of Confundus charm. Using Maester Luwin was his last attempt to get what he wanted the normal way. If that also fails, there was no other option left before him other than magical compulsion. He turned a corner on a corridor leading to his siblings' rooms when a bucket full of flour got dumped on his head out of nowhere. From head to toe, he was covered in powder by the looks of it. He coughed and wheezed his way out of the offending powder while his ears picked up laughter and giggling from nearby. With some difficulty, he removed the offending powder near his eyes and found the source of the laughter. He saw Sansa and Jon laughing at his peril, holding their ribs. Robb, Theon, and Garland were smirking at the success of their prank and enjoying his struggle to dust off the flour from his body and clothes. You're gonna pay for that. Harry ran towards his siblings intent on smearing them with the powder that was sticking to his body and clothes. It led to a wild chase all around the castle, turning it upside down in the process. The chaos they unleashed and the mess they left for the servants earned them a thorough dressing down from the Lord and Lady of Winterfell. The aftermath of the prank diminished any further hope of Harry gaining permission for the trip to Dragonstone. Bereft of choices, he decided to lead with the Confundus charm to speed things along to his satisfaction. But Harry chose to wait instead of acting quickly, mostly because he wanted to spend a few days with his siblings and Marwyn's raven was yet to arrive. On the fourth day of his stay at Winterfell, Maester Luwin finally gave him the good news. The raven from Marwyn finally arrived, and it didn't take Harry much effort to charm the piece of paper with a powerful Confundus charm before it was handed over to the Lord of Winterfell. "This Archmaester Marwyn, do you know him well, Maester?" Eddard asked, after glossing through the contents in the piece of parchment. "He is a knowledgeable man with a link for healing arts forged in his youth. He is also an enthusiastic traveler who has mapped out distant lands and tackled foreign ailments. Harry should be safe under the Archmaster's care." Harry watched in fascination as his father exchanged a long look with Maester Luwin. For a moment, Harry could feel his compulsion waver before the charm managed to consume his father, smoothing out his features. Archmaester Marwyn is also the foremost authority when it comes to magic in the Citadel. I've also communicated with the Citadel about the exact condition of Lord Stannis' daughter. My colleagues are confident the castle is safe to travel. Maester Luwin added, "All right," Eddard sighed, his eyes trained on Harry. "You can go to Dragonstone, but I'll be sending a guard detail under Jury." Harry readily agreed. That's one down, Harry thought. Now to repeat the same feat with Mother. In the end, Harry easily secured permission from his mother. He took custody of the parchment from Maester Luwin and had it delivered straight to his mother. The Confundus took effect easily, and that was the end of the story. He stayed a few more days in Winterfell to ensure the charm took proper hold and to transport some more migrant small folk from the nearby area. Nearly a month and a half passed in the blink of an eye. The plan was for Harry to travel to Dragonstone after Marwyn arrives at the old Targaryen stronghold. This left Harry with a lot of time on his hands before journeying south. So he thought this time was better spent on designing a new airship that was a precursor to the more versatile model that he was planning with a dangerous trip in mind. With the arrival of more builders and small folk, he got access to a suitably large workforce. There was ample work to be done inside the castle, but Harry was content to let that work lag in favor of another project. He could afford that delay because Avalon was a giant castle comparable in size to Winterfell. He didn't need all the towers and buildings in the castle to be functional for the castle's smooth running. Therefore, he diverted some of the workforces to constructing a larger airship. Not that there was anything wrong with the current airship. It was just that the current one could be hardly classified as a ship. It was more of a boat, and Harry wanted a bigger one. This time, he decided to scrap the designs based on boats or longships. Instead, he went straight for an enclosed structure modeled after a zeppelin. The enclosed structure would offer more protection, and he was hoping he could design the airship to facilitate the easy loading and unloading of heavier goods. With the current airship, he had to step in and shrink any of the heavier and larger sized goods to fit inside the airship. Most importantly, with access to ice dragon crystals, he'd also be able to cut down the time for replenishing magic used in the airship. When he constructed the first airship, he had to depend extensively on runes to keep the flight capability of the airship consistent and work as intended. But that was no longer the case, all thanks to the ice dragon crystals. They were saturated with immense magic, which he was easily able to incorporate into the new design, which helps in reducing the dependency on runes. The first airship required a lot of runes, but the new one only needed minimal runes, and that was to function only as a backup security feature. The entirety of the new airship was instead directly powered by charms and spells that were bonded into the frame. And these spells were further directly powered by the ice dragon crystals placed under heavy wards connected by monitoring charms on his power ring. The most difficult part, however, was working on the interior of the airship. His magic could only help so far in speeding up the processing of wood and other resources. The real work has to be done by the workers themselves. When the work was finally finished, Harry was not satisfied with the quality of the interior. It was to be expected, though. The builders were working on an entirely new field of design as far as a ship was concerned, and there were severe time constraints involved. Perhaps, if he had not rushed the workers to complete within the time frame, they could have put more quality into their work. Maybe the interior could be redesigned at a later date, Harry thought, letting out an appreciative hum as he took in the exterior of the airship. The airship now looked like a smaller zeppelin made of wood. The striking feature was the addition of a long strip of glass window that adorned the two sides of the airship. That particular feature required some magical involvement. Glass was not exactly a locally available material in Westeros, but in the process of making glass window panes for the airship, Harry established several small glass-making facilities. For now, he alone could work those facilities, but once he returned from Dragonstone, he planned to add some features to the facilities, allowing the small folk to produce glass. The shores of Avalon and much of the Sea Dragon Point were rich in sand, suitable for making glass. Surely he'd make a killing out of establishing a budding glass-making industry. "Well, this one certainly looks imposing," said Oberyn, standing beside Harry, taking in the newly built airship. "It'll certainly give the people of Dragonstone a fright. Tell me, we are going to land the airship far away from the eyes of the small folk, right?" Jory inquired, looking at Harry. "Where's the fun in that?" Harry smirked. Stannis watched Archmaester Marwyn fussing over his daughter and occasionally jabbing a metal stick against his daughter's cheek. At first, his daughter cried loudly in protest, but now the child was looking curiously around in her crib. "The infection seems to have gone dormant," the Archmaester commented. "Is she safe?" Stannis asked, his eyes finding the curious blue eyes of his daughter. "I honestly can't say for certain. Grayscale is a dangerous affliction, and I'm sad to say we at the Citadel have always considered Grayscale victims as a lost cause. The infection spreads rapidly and turns the soft skin into stone, but it doesn't end there. The victim is also robbed of their mental faculties, turning them violent as the infection grows," said Marwyn. Stannis already knew all that. He was already well informed about the disease by Maester Cresson and the many other maesters that treated his daughter. "Tell me, Archmaester, do you seriously believe Harry Stark can cure my daughter?" asked Stannis. "Frankly speaking, I do not know. But I do know that Harry Stark possesses powerful magic beyond the scope and understanding of most learned men I know in the Citadel. The reason we masters have not found a cure for Grayscale all these years is that it is no normal disease. It's a blood curse fueled by sacrificial magic and spite." Stannis gritted his teeth at the long and windy explanation that made less sense to him. He was starting to see why Maester Cresson expressed his doubts about hosting Archmaester Marwyn. He was about to ask the Archmaester more about what the man was planning to do with helping his daughter when his ears picked up the sound of rushed footsteps. "My lord!" A guard gasped out of breath near the door. "What is it?" he asked with a frown, taking in the wide-eyed look on the guard's face. "There is something in the sky, my lord," said the guard, sweating profusely. "There is something in the sky," Stannis drawled slowly, wondering whether this particular guard was a simpleton. "I believe Harry Stark has arrived. Come, we must greet the young lad," said Archmaester Marwyn, who proceeded to take his leave from the side of his daughter. Stannis eyed the man in bewilderment and felt himself grit his teeth more firmly for not making any sense. Nonetheless, he followed the Archmaester after making sure his daughter was looked after by the servants. On his way, he managed to see a giant wooden construct of some sort floating amongst the clouds. He paused by the window side and stared at the sight before him, in utter disbelief. His mouth fell open as the wooden ship-like object began to lower down and set itself on the shore. "I told you, my lord. Harrion Stark possesses magic beyond our comprehension." Stannis distantly heard the Archmaester comment from nearby. He nodded absently before following the Archmaester to greet his new guest. A few minutes later, Stannis was once again starting to think he should not have listened to Davos and sought out the Starks. The Stark boy was not alone, which was to be expected. But what he didn't expect was for Oberyn Martell, his paramour, and bastard daughter to accompany the Stark boy. The said Stark boy was currently poking and prodding at his daughter's Greyscale, afflicted cheek with a piece of wood. He exchanged a look with Maester Crescent, who looked none too happier to be a witness to the current happenings, but he had ordered the Maester Crescent to be present, and that was the end of it. Suddenly, his eyes caught the eerie yellow glow that lighted up the chamber of his daughter. To his surprise, the light was coming from the tip of the stick the Stark boy was using.
"What's happening?"
Maester Crescent asked in surprise. "Shush now! The boy's working a spell. Learn to recognize them, Maester," Archmaester Marwyn said, waving his hand dismissively at Crescent, who looked immensely offended, but remained silent nonetheless. The light slowly died down, and Stannis looked at his daughter's face, hoping that this magic spell somehow cured her Greyscale. But the disfigured part of her cheek remained afflicted with Greyscale, despite his hopes and prayers. "There's definitely dark magic involved. I need to draw it out, but first I need to make a salve to weaken the cursed parts of the skin," said Harrion, without taking his eyes away from Stannis' daughter. "Does that mean you can cure my daughter?" Stannis asked hopefully. "Give me 3 moons, Lord Stannis. Your daughter will not even have a scar left on her face. I can promise you that," said Harrion. "Well, isn't that some good news? Come now, Lord Stannis. You can afford a smile, can't you?" said Oberyn Martell in a jolly manner. Any sort of relief and happiness he felt was immediately drained away as he was mocked by the Dornish prince. He gritted his teeth, but otherwise ignored the Red Viper. His eyes remained trained on his poor daughter. He hoped his daughter would be saved, as the Stark boy promised. Dragonstone had a long history predating even the arrival of Aemir Targaryen. The arrival of House Targaryen was the one incident that stood out in the larger history of the Narrow Sea Island, and much of Westeros for that matter. But that doesn't mean the island of Dragonstone was an area disengaged from the long history of Westeros. Maybe the Andals didn't think much of the island, but the First Men certainly have had a history in the place, as did the Valyrian freehold before Aemir Targaryen's arrival. Harry was looking right at that history, eagerly taking in the cave arts that he found in his exploration. The First Men runes could be seen all over the intricate cave system that tweaked his magical senses even now. When he first came into the castle of Dragonstone, he could not sense any magic in his sensory perception. It only took him a night's stay to feel the echoes from the walls of the castle. On the 3rd day, those echoes were far more powerful, and his senses were being constantly assaulted by the calls of the ancient magic lying dormant in this place. He could see why the Dragon Lords of the Valyrian freehold were interested in the island and constructed Dragonstone Castle as their outpost on the island. Like Sea Dragon Point, there was a powerful ley line on the island perfect for charging spells and the growth of magical creatures and plant life. Going by what he was feeling, Harry was nearly certain the ley line was far more powerful than the one he was nursing back to full potential in Avalon. The ley line's power was so prevalent here that it was automatically awakening just by his presence. He could even feel the ancient protections weaved into the runes of the First Men were also slowly gaining magical substance. It was quite fascinating to watch all of this happening. He foolishly thought the center of magical power was in the north or Skane, but no, he was very much wrong to make such an assumption. There was an immense magical nexus on the island, and he had a feeling that it'd only increase if he goes further east across the Narrow Sea. As for the source of this immense magical nexus that was partially awakened, he had a feeling that it was tied intrinsically to the Dragonmont. The volcano of Dragonstone was already active when he arrived at the island fiefdom of Stannis Baratheon. It was spitting out gray smoke from its peak, And once he had a closer look, it was also releasing smoke from its many vents scattered across its vast rocky expanse. Even the many tunnels leading to the volcano were fast getting warmer as time passed. The Dragonmont was getting far more activity, and he was no idiot to think that all of these activities were a coincidence. No, magic was definitely involved, and it was trying to communicate its will. He could see why the First Men were so interested in Dragonstone. It was quite obvious. Harry had often found certain geographical sites project a magical will of their own. The reason why this natural will was manifesting remains unknown, sans some pure speculation from a few magical scholars. Some theorize that these magical nexuses are the result of echoes left by a previous magical tribe that called these sites their home. For whatever reason, these tribes may move out of these sites, but their collective consciousness leaves an imprint on the magic of the land. Pair that with an emerging ley line, the magic that permeates that particular area gains a will of its own over time. It was assumed that many magical creatures gained magic and were shaped by these localized nexuses of magic scattered across the continents. It was only a theory, but one that Harry thought there was some substance. He had seen several places of such unique magical will and nexuses in his old world. Hogwarts was one such place, as the castle had gained a mind of its own, going as far as locking out sketchy characters like Umbridge and Fudge from gaining control over the castle. He didn't see why the nexus of Dragonstone was not of a similar nature. The four girls looked at each other and shook their heads negatively. Before the Valyrians ever came to this place, it was the abode of the First Men and the children. This island is isolated from the mainland, away from the cold gaze of the others. This was their forge. They shaped and forged weapons made of dragonglass and transported them to the mainland during the first long night, said Harry, his fingers tracing the runes carved into the gray and black stones of the tunnel leading to the core of Dragonmont. Do you see why this place is littered with so much painted and carved history of the First Men and the Children of the Forest? Harry asked, turning his sights on his 3 Valkyrie and Nimriia. He could feel the echoes of magic carved into these runes and their intentions. He had often wondered how the First Men, backward as they were, managed to arm themselves with weapons capable of defeating the wily enemy sealed away beyond the wall. The fact that the early First Men used dragonglass weapons to fight the others had rubbed him the wrong way, but Dragonstone was now making sense of those little inconsistencies. The runes in this place were used to absorb the heat from the Dragonmont and used to finely shape the dragonglass into arrowheads, spear tips, and knives. There were even runes carved into the tunnels to pull dragonglass ore, which was working to this day, as he could see the black obsidian gleaming in many parts of the tunnels. Oh, come on. Be serious, Harrian. You can't believe those old stories about White Walkers and dead men walking to be real. Nimriia let out a derisive snort. Master Harrian never jokes on matters about the others. The others are as real as they come, as are their whites, said Anya, throwing a dirty look at the daughter of Prince Oberyn. Harry turned away from those two as they fell into an argument. Ever since he had passively begun to help Nimriia awaken her magic, Anya had been a little jealous. That jealousy was transforming into a rivalry of sorts between the two. Nimriia was not exactly aware the friction emerging with Anya stemmed from the elder Valkyrie's insecurity, more than anything else. If he could help it, it'd remain that way for the foreseeable future. He was still studying the unique magical signature that was in Nimriia's body. Not to mention he was not an idiot to teach Nimriia more about his magic without a failsafe. The Martells, despite his close friendship with Oberyn, was out for their self-interest and revenge. Entrusting them with magical power and knowledge would be the height of stupidity. He planned to create a society that accepts and celebrates magic, not one that uses magic as a prime medium for settling rivalries and grudges. Your people believe in stupid stories meant to scare children. Turns out the northern mountains are inhabited by children. Nimriia mocked. Anyway, the point was moot, considering the nature of Nimriia's magic was somewhat different from what he had, so far, found from other natives. Anya was like him, capable of forming spells, but not to the fullest extent. Her true skill lies in elemental spells, especially fire. Adela was a gifted student when it comes to runes, although she was still in the process of learning to charge the runes, because her personal magic was mostly depleted for the kind of work advanced runes demand, Kyla, on the other hand, more adept at sensing magic than the other two Valkyrie. Her magical reserves were lying dormant, and he was nearly positive it'll ignite once he nursed the ley line in Avalon to emerge from its dormant state. In fact, all three of his Valkyrie would get a significant boost once they spend a significant amount of time in Avalon saturated with the raw magic of the land. You'd say that, you ignorant Andal. Anya snarled. Foreigners like you can never understand the deep history of this land. Enough, you two. Anya, take your sisters and map out the runes of this tunnel. Adela, I want you to copy as many runic scripts as you can. Kylo will be sensing out more scripts that are hidden in the tunnel. Harry assigned the three Valkyrie with jobs that keep them engaged while he led Nimriia away from the tunnel. Who are you calling an Endel? I'm a Reinhardt, you stupid girl. Nimriia growled. You do not let go of a chance to pick a fight with them, will you? Harry asked tiredly, walking back to the castle away from the Dragonmont. I always keep an open mind. If you hadn't seen the airship with your own eyes, would you have believed the rumors about a northern boy that can make flying ships? Harry asked, making Nimriia pause, coming to a halt. They are idiots believing in fanciful tales. Don't tell me you also believe in those silly stories, Harrian. If you do, I'd be feeling like an idiot to think of you as the smartest boy I ever know. Nimriia grouched, flicking her dark hair over her shoulder, letting it dance as she strode away with purposeful long strides. Harry could see the struggle that was brewing behind Nimriia's eyes. Okay, Nimriia slowly nodded, gathering her thoughts. But that's different, said Nimriia, turning away from him and continuing her long strides into the castle, giving Harry an eyeful of her sensually swaying hips and shapely derriere. Is she doing that on purpose? Harry wondered. He wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. From what he had seen so far, Nimriia was very open about her sexuality and flaunts her charm around to her advantage. The Dornish people, while predominantly Andales, identify more with their Ronar roots. Even their inheritance laws were framed around the cultural traits of the Ronar civilization. Harry was quite eager to visit Dorne when he was fully grown. The place sounds quite lovely for a vacation. Oh, I'm so looking forward to growing up. Is it really necessary for this unholy sound to heal the babe? Maester Crescent asked, directing a disapproving frown toward Nimriia. XX. Harry suppressed his amusement as Nimriia continued her best to annoy the Maester and Stannis Baratheon with the flute he gifted. He did not gift the flute out of some misplaced notion that Num had some extraordinary talent with the musical instrument. Rather, the flute was a cleverly disguised magical instrument littered with secret runes inside that was keeping tabs on her shifting magical aura. There were also some carefully applied listening charms as well to keep tabs on the mortals for good measure. Not to mention, there was a tracking charm as well that was connected to his power ring. I'm sure there is a reason for the flute that is beyond the normal understanding of the Maesters. Please do keep your prejudices confined to your thoughts, Maester Crescent. Archmaester Marwyn admonished the Maester of Dragonstone, who noisily huffed, making his displeasure known. Harry could hear the grinding of teeth that was the characteristic telltale sign of an annoyed Stannis Baratheon. He suspected the second Baratheon brother was going to suffer tooth loss far early at this rate. That reminded Harry of looking into some potions for tooth care, skin care, and hair care. Music has a magic of its own. All dark magic is fueled by malevolent emotions and intentions. The cure is to weaken the malevolent will that binds the curse of the Greyscale to weaken its hold on the child, said Harry. He was not blowing smoke with that excuse. Music could be a powerful tool in healing the effects of dark curses if it was suitably powered by magic, but Nguyen's flute music was just a test on his part. He had been trying out many subtle ways to get a reaction out of Nguyen's dormant magic. So far, all his attempts have failed. He had thought the famed water magic of the Rhoynar might manifest in Nimriia. Keeping that in mind, he had subtly used Nimriia near potions to see whether her presence shows any significant effects on the tonics he prepared. Nothing much happened, and he had tested her against some of the magical ingredients he collected from Skane, which also ended in disappointment. He was hoping the flute would shed some light on the magic coursing through Nimriia. Sweeping those thoughts away to the far corner of his mind, he focused on the task at hand. There was no doubt that the Greyscale affliction was in any way a normal, infectious disease. It most certainly had its roots in dark magic. His 3 days of study further revealed there was sacrificial magic used on the curse. The malevolent will infused in the curse he was sensing, even now, all but confirmed, there was some sort of ritualistic sacrifice fueling the curse. Channeling more magical power into the Elder Wand, Harry began chanting in Parseltongue. He could feel the natural magic of the Dragonmont surging as he began chanting in the Serpentongue. For whatever reason, this world was far more attuned to Serpentongue than even his home world, which was a fascinating tidbit of information. He knew Parseltongue could be understood by the children of the forest. Wisps of silver light blinked into existence at the tip of his wand and proceeded to sink into the grayscale-infected skin of the babe sleeping soundly in the crib. At first, nothing happened, forcing Harry to chant for minutes, uttering long scripts of healing spells in Parseltongue. After 5 minutes passed, the grayscale began to sizzle and let out black smoke. "Now thank Merlin for sleeping and numbing charms," Harry thought, as he drained the dark magic from the child. He quickly nodded in Anya's direction, signaling his trusted Valkyrie to bring a small glass flask to his side. Harry began earnestly directing the parting black smoke into the glass jar. The runes painted all around the glass jar, and the charms he bound to the glass kept the black smoke sealed inside the jar. The dark magic was somewhat weakened once it was untethered from the flesh of the child peacefully sleeping in the crib. It was a delicate work to drain dark magic, especially from a young baby, which is barely holding any magic in its body. If the child was awake, it'd have cried till its throat hurt. Harry patiently kept chanting for a long time, until finally, the black smoke stopped coming from the infected skin. "The difficult part is over. The dark magic that was infecting your daughter is sealed away in this jar, Lord Stannis," Harry said, sealing the glass jar shut, with the conjured fluid, silver, that coalesced around the mouth of the jar. With the skin remains afflicted, Archmaester Marwyn trailed off, looking at the scaled skin of the babe. Adela fished out a small vial of golden liquid from her pouch before pouring a small drop on the infected skin of the child. The liquid burned away the infected skin before their eyes, and at the same time, new unblemished skin regrew. In a matter of 2 minutes, the daughter of Stannis Baratheon looked like any other ordinary child, except for the larger ears, which was a family trait from the child's mother's side. I know Harry nodded at the man before looking at Adela. "Lord Stannis, your daughter is cured of Grayscale. It's safe to say she'll never even know she was afflicted by the curse unless someone explains it to her in the future. I guarantee that the infection will not rear up again. Your daughter will need no further medication or procedures going forward," said Harry. While Stannis Baratheon struggled to maintain a calm facade, his wife, on the other hand, was another matter. He could see the Lord of Dragonstone was moved by his words. Stannis Baratheon was a man who showed a cold exterior to everyone, but he was nonetheless a man influenced by emotions. Harry could see the emotional turmoil that was warring within the Lord of Dragonstone. "Oh, bless you. Bless you and your family. 1,000 blessings to you," Selyse Baratheon cried, pulling Harry into a hug. There, my lady." Harry attempted to console the crying woman. Harry patted her back, trying to calm the hysterical woman down. "How can we ever repay you for saving our daughter?" Selyse asked once she regained her bearings. "My lady wife speaks true. Ask anything of me. Harry Stark, and if it is within my power, I shall see it done," said Stannis, standing by his wife's side. His face softening a tad. "I seek no payment or hold any wishes for curing your daughter. Lord Stannis, the old gods gave me the gift of magic to heal and restore the world of their design. Dark curses like this, Greyscale, have tainted this world. It is my duty to cleanse these blemishes so that the age of magic the old gods wills is manifested in the world," said Harry. Now, here Harry was blowing so much smoke, but he had an agenda for leading with that cringy dialogue. Having seen the magical potential of the island of Dragonstone, he wanted access to the Dragonmont. He had barely even scratched the surface when it comes to mapping out the Dragonmont. Going by the information his trusted Valkyrie had gathered from the runes, this place was just a gold mine when it comes to studying more of the magic of the Dawn Age. He was not willing to let that opportunity slip by, nor was he willing to let the Dragonmont lie dormant. He wanted to see the full potential of the Dragonmont unleashed, not just to satisfy his curiosity, but also to hatch the dragon eggs in his custody. He had tried the normal way of giving magical fire and infusing magic into the 2 dragon eggs, but the eggs remained unresponsive. "I suspect the eggs need exposure to a suitably large magical source for a conducive environment to hatch safely. Otherwise, the eggs might deliver a stunted hatchling or remain petrified. Harry thought. It was a theory, but one that he strongly believed in. Therefore, he needed the Baratheons of Dragonstone to be welcoming of his presence. Tell me, Lord Harrion, tell me more about the old gods. Tell me more so that I may pray properly for the mercy they have shown to my daughter, Celis. Baratheon begged him on her knees. It's funny that I thought of all religions as the root of all evil. But now I realize that religion is only as evil as the people that follows allows it to be. Harry thought, looking into the eager and zealous eyes of Celis Baratheon. Harry eyed the Baratheon couple. When he looked at Stannis and Celis Baratheon, he only saw 2 new converts for the old gods and his ticket to accelerate the emergence of magic in Westeros. This is so wrong, Maester Crescent muttered, walking back and forth across the entire length of the painted table. There is no man in the 7 kingdoms who wishes the best for Stannis than Maester Crescent, Davos thought. Davos eyed the old Maester who had served loyally beside Lord Stannis since his lord was a child. There is no man in the 7 kingdoms who wishes the best for Stannis than Maester Crescent, Davos thought. Do you know why I left my post at Storm's End and came with Stannis against the express wishes of the Citadel? Maester Crescent suddenly asked, catching Davos by surprise. Davos scratched his chin, wilting under the stare of the gray eyes of the old Maester. Stannis is a man of duty. Duty is what has kept him strong after Lord Stefan and Lady Cassana. He holds on to it like a shipwrecked sailor struggling to stay afloat by holding onto a plank of wood. I don't see any change in Lord Stannis that compromises commitment to duty, said Davos, only to get a sharp look from the Maester. Do you not see the danger the Stark boy has brought upon Stannis? Lady Celis has abandoned the 7 in favor of the old gods on a dime. Every waking moment, day and night, she insists Stannis do the same. Maester Crescent huffed, "It is a disaster." I didn't take you for a godly man, Maester Crescent, said Davos. I know enough not to fixate on one religion, but the lords of Westeros and the small folk are another matter. Dragonstone and the Narrow Sea lords follow the faith of the 7. House Baratheon is now the royal house of Westeros. Along with the many assorted titles that come with the crown, there is the title of Defender of the Faith. Do you not see how it'll look to the realm if the king's brother abandons the faith? Maester Crescent asked, his eyes alight with worry. Maester Crescent, Sir Davos. Davos was not the only one to have been taken by surprise by the arrival of Sir Axel Florent, Lady Solis' uncle in the Castellan of Dragonstone. Sir Axel, Maester Crescent frowned at the knight. Lady Ceci's uncle was a difficult man in Davos' opinion. The man was stout, round, with thick arms, capable of crushing a grown man in minutes. While the Castellan of Dragonstone was courteous to most, he was also quick to anger, which had always made Davos speak very carefully in the presence of the Florent Knight. Perhaps it was because of this caution that Davos was treated fairly by the Reacher Knight, unlike other knights and lords of higher stature in Lord Stannis' service. Lord Stannis and Lady Celis ask for both of your presence at the foot of Dragonmont. Davos exchanged a look with Maester Crescent, even as he took to his feet. Don't tell me this has something to do with the Stark boy. Maester Crescent bemoaned, rubbing his old face tiredly. Davos noticed the disapproving frown that graced the face of Sir Axel's face. It seemed Maester Crescent is not exactly being cautious to notice the shifting winds blowing the sails. Davos thought, I wouldn't want to keep Lord Stannis and Lady Celis waiting. Please come, Maester Crescent, said Davos, pleading discreetly with his eyes. Thankfully, the Maester agreed without making a fuss, even though the man kept muttering under his breath on their walk toward the Dragonmont. On some level, Davos understood Maester Crescent's apprehension, considering Lord Stannis' position in the royal court. 'Tis no secret that King Robert favors his younger brother Renly, otherwise why deny Lord Stannis the lordship of Storm's End? Davos mused. He could understand why the lordship of Dragonstone was given to Lord Stannis immediately after the rebellion. The Narrow Sea Lords were Targaryen loyalists, and there was no one better to rein them in other than Lord Stannis. As he understood it, the seat of Dragonstone was also the seat of the heir to the Iron Throne. Lord Stannis was the heir of King Robert, but that state of affairs changed with the birth of Prince Joffrey. In Davos' opinion, Storm's End should have been given to Lord Stannis, at least in the wake of his lord's victory over the Ironborn. But that was just his personal opinion. There might be other reasons that he was not privy to for the king to keep Lord Stannis in Dragonstone, but he certainly knew those reasons were not shared with his lord. When they finally reached their destination, there was a small group of castle servants, sworn knights of Lord Stannis, and small folk present gathered around in a circle. It was with some trepidation that he followed Sir Axel into the crowd, and what he saw made him a little relieved. Thankfully, no unpleasant event was going on. That brings shame to his lord's family. It was just the Stark boy planting some saplings around what appeared to be a small spring of water. Davos blinked a few times and searched his memory about a spring of water in this locality. He scratched his chin in deep thought, but he could not recall any water bodies nearby this area. The spring was not particularly large, so he might have missed it. "This is not good, Sir Davos," Maester Cresson muttered. Davos looked at the old maester in exasperation. He had the distinct impression that Maester Cresson was rather a devout follower of the Seven, and that was the problem rather than just the concern for Lord Stannis' position in the court. Not just that, he also noticed Sir Axel was also keeping an ear out for Maester Cresson's words. This does not bode well, Davos thought, knowing that Sir Axel's loyalty was to his niece rather than Stannis. Perhaps this is not the right time. Davos whispered back, but it must have gone unheard, because Maester Cresson continued to air his complaints. Planting weirwood saplings in Dragonstone. For centuries, Dragonstone has never had weirwood trees, and now the faith will not like this, and word will quickly spread of Stannis' sacrilege and that of Lady Salis's. Maester Cresson bemoaned, his gray eyebrows scrunching together in worry and palpable disapproval. "What would you rather do in my niece's position, Maester? She prayed and prayed for days and nights for the Seven to heal her daughter. Bear in mind, she is a mother who lost many children on her birthing bed, so keep your less forgiving thoughts in your mind, Maester, before you bring the wrath of House Florent upon your bald head." Sir Axel growled at them. Davos noticed many eyes were watching them, and Lord Stannis was not so ignorant of their conversation. So, to save face and to keep the peace in his lord's household, he decided to step in. "Peace, Sir Axel. The Maester was just concerned for Lady Salis and Lord Stannis. I'm sure he meant no disrespect to the good lady. Let's just pray for Lady Salis's and her daughter's good health. The gods, old or new, are welcome to bless the Lord and Lady of Dragonstone." It turns out his diplomatic approach was not so well received by Maester Cresson. "This is not right, Sir Axel. Tell me, would Lord Florent approve of his niece taking up the old gods? Think of the scandal this brings to House Florent in the reach at the heart of the faith." Maester Cresson said. Davos slowly extracted himself away from the Maester's side, not to give the impression to Lady Salis or Lord Stannis that he was standing with Maester Cresson in this matter. The matters of lordly politics and religion were far above him, and has always been for someone like him whose only concern was putting enough food on the table for his wife and sons. What have the gods, old or new, ever done for people like him? They were cold and silent to his kind, so he saw no reason not to return the treatment. At the same time, he was aware not everyone thought the same way as him. "If the Seven were fair to our house, my brother would be ruling from Highgarden instead of Mace Tyrell, who starved Lord Stannis, and my niece would have been the Lady of Storm's End." Sir Axel growled. "Quiet, both of you. I'll not have you disrespect our guest in my presence." Stannis warned, his sharp blue eyes putting both Sir Axel and Maester Cresson into silence. Davos let out a relieved sigh, for he had the presence of mind not to attract the ire of his lord. Besides, Maester Cresson and Sir Axel have the luxury of bearing the ire of Lord Stannis and living the rest of their lives in comfort. He could not afford something like that. He could no longer go back to the life of a smuggler, so he was entirely dependent on the mercy shown by Lord Stannis. His sons served the Lord of Dragonstone, and he'd not jeopardize their future by displeasing Stannis Baratheon. He could feel Maester Cresson looking pointedly at him. Whatever might be the reason, he pretended not to see the old Maester, and focused on, well, he was not exactly sure what was going on, but he kept his eyes on the Stark boy, and kept his mouth shut. "Lord Stannis, Lady Salis, the blessings of the old gods do not come easily. The old gods do not care for your posturing or useless prayer. To receive the help of the old gods, you need to wish for the well-being of more than your family in your heart, said Harry, leading Stannis and Selyse near the planted saplings. Lady Selyse wishes not to suffer any more miscarriages. It is her wish to not lose any of her children to the enemy of life. The old gods would stay silent for such a selfish wish, but if your honest prayer is to seek protection for all mothers regardless of their status or beliefs, and the gods are satisfied in your sincerity. How do I do that? Guide me, O blessed one, said Selyse, falling to her knees. The duty of the lady and lord of Dragonstone is to protect and rule its people, is it not? Focus on your duty, my lady, and embrace the people as your children. See yourself as their mother and face the old gods. Touch one of the saplings and say your prayers in your mind. Show the gods your heart and they'll let them into theirs. Before the assembled crowd, Selyse Baratheon knelt. She also forced her husband to emulate her, which the Lord of Dragonstone did, albeit reluctantly. Together, the couple touched a sapling and prayed. There was a strong gust of wind carrying the hot air of the Dragonmont, followed by a blinding flash of light. Before the gathered crowd, a miracle took place, its effects as clear as day, and word spread all across the island of the miracle. You know, I thought it'd be a waste of time to come to this island, but it's turning out to be highly entertaining and beneficial, said Oberyn, looking out of the window from his chambers and enjoying the full frontal view of the Dragonmont it offered. I do agree that it has been entertaining, my love, but benefit, I do not see it. Illyria said, sprawled out on their bed, covered in a sheer silken robe. House Baratheon is not as united as we assumed. I do not know whether Harry intended it, but his actions here will only increase the estrangement between the Baratheon brothers, and I see the benefit in that for our goals. You mean to befriend Stannis Baratheon and use him against the Lannisters and his brother? Illyria asked, her tone suggesting the feasibility of such a plan. Oberyn chuckled while shaking his head. Nothing of such sort. These things have a way of working out on their own. We just have to provide a little nudge in the right direction, said Oberyn, marveling at the gigantic branches of the 5 weirwood trees that had sprung up where the saplings were planted. I need to write to Doran. My brother is the more experienced one when it comes to the war that goes on in the shadows. He'll know to be discreet and use this situation without showing our hands in this. You play a dangerous game, my love. You risk endangering your current relationship with Harrion. Illyria warned, her dark, smoldering eyes trained on her lover, who continued to stare out of the window. She climbed out of their bed and enveloped Oberyn in a hug from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. Her eyes found the gigantic weirwood trees in the distance. She could even make out the giant 5-pointed star etched on the bark of the giant trees. It was truly a miraculous event, but her months of stay in the north have sort of prepared her for expecting the impossible to happen when it comes to Harry and Stark. Your concern is not unwarranted. But you know my brother, he knows to play the game well, said Oberyn, pressing a kiss on his lover's ebony hair. XXXX. Harry was impressed by the speed with which his trusted Valkyrie mapped out the ruins of several unexplored tunnels of the Dragonmont. They've toiled in the tunnels often without rest or sleep to collect the information they needed to set things right in the Dragonmont. The presence of First Men runes accelerated the emergence of the ley lines, and soon magic was in the air, thrumming with power, not to the same extent as in the past, but it was considerably more powerful. The little trick he did with the 5 weirwood trees and the healing pond was a testament to the rising magic of Dragonmont. He felt no shame whatsoever in using the frankly unhinged mind of Selyse Baratheon to his advantage. The woman was just so easily moldable, and he couldn't resist the opportunity to cultivate a lifelong friend in the Lady of Dragonstone. There was no way he was leaving Dragonstone alone for long periods of time. He intended to make more visits, as the Dragonmont was something unique, and it'd be right useful in hatching the dragons. Not to mention there were still a hell of a lot more tunnels and secret chambers inside the Dragonmont. He was also sure the Valyrians had made some changes to the Dragonmont to create a nourishable environment for their fire dragon companions. He was quite eager to learn all about that, as he gathered it'd be very useful in his future visit to Valyria. The Valyrians were an interesting people. Somehow they've managed to bind dragons to their bloodlines. At least several select Dragonlord families managed to accomplish this feat, and they were said to be unearthly beautiful. Even the wizards and goblins have never managed to bind dragons to their blood. Wizards managed it with house elves, but even there, the bond was nothing like what he had read from several books about the Targaryen dragons. There were so many fascinating things the Valyrians discovered in the field of magic. The Valyrian glass candles were one of them, and then he had come to know that the Valyrians also had people blessed with the power of prophetic dreams. He was not exactly an enthusiast of prophecies, but his friendship with Luna taught him many intricacies of the spirit realm. He didn't fully understand it, nor did he think he ever would, but he was interested to learn the Valyrian interpretation of the art. Most importantly, he was interested in the book written by Daenerys the Dreamer. The book called Signs and Portents was allegedly a book written by Daenerys Targaryen, who foresaw the doom of Valyria. Details about the book were sketchy, and he only learned of the book's existence from a random reference made by Septon Bart's work about the dragons of House Targaryen. He had searched for the book in Dragonstone using summoning charms and other locating charms to no effect. It was most likely the book was either stolen, destroyed, or kept in another secure location, perhaps the Red Keep. There was also the possibility that the Targaryens kept their most valuable possessions, other than their dragon eggs, in a secret chamber inside the Dragonmont or in the castle. It could be possible that the artifacts were safely stored away under magical protections of Valyrian origin capable of thwarting his spells. When it comes to a race like the Valyrians, he wouldn't put it past them to master sophisticated magic. Nonetheless, he was happy to find a set of Valyrian glass candles in Dragonstone. It was not particularly kept hidden, and he had only come to know of its existence thanks to Archmaester Marwyn. The man was apologetic that he was unable to transport the glass candles in the Citadel to Dragonstone. Apparently, the Citadel was not agreeable to part with their property, even though they don't have any members amongst their ranks that can operate the Valyrian artifact, other than Marwyn. He was incredibly fortunate there was a glass candle of Valyrian origin in Dragonstone. Otherwise, he'd have had to resort to nicking the Valyrian communication device from the Citadel on his way back home. That's why he was walking towards the solar of Lord Stannis while Jory Castle was overseeing the safe transport of their companions and personal effects into the airship. When he neared Lord Stannis' solar, he could see several guards standing outside a closed door, but there was shouting going on inside the solar. "Hi." Harry waved at the guards. "May I see Lord Stannis?" The guards looked at each other in askance. Did Robert ever think about me when he made his decisions? Maester Crescent? Did he even send a raven inquiring about the health of my daughter, even once? Stannis thundered, his words sounding off as if bolts of lightning were raining down from the sky with all their fury. Ours the fury indeed. Fitting words for House Baratheon, Harry thought as he heard the Lord of Dragonstone argue in earnest with the Maester of the castle. Well, I asked you a question, Maester. Did he? Stannis could be heard shouting at the top of his lungs again, but the shouting came to a halt when one of the guards bravely knocked on the door. My lord, Lord Harrion Stark asks for an audience, the guard said, dipping his head into the room tentatively. Send him in, Stannis said after a moment of silence. The door swung wide open for him. He nodded thankfully at the guard before stepping inside. Lord Stannis, Maester Crescent, Harry said, nodding at both men once entering the room. I've come to express my gratitude on behalf of House Stark for your hospitality, Lord Stannis. It is I who should be thanking you for curing my daughter of her affliction. My wife and I are indebted to you. If there is anything you need, you only need to ask. I've no need for any material gain, but if you'd allow it, I'd like your permission to visit Dragonstone for academic purposes, said Harry. I do not understand, Stannis said, frowning at Harry. I'm a student of magic, and I've taken some interest in an artifact in your possession. Lord Stannis, this is the only castle in Westeros that holds a Valyrian glass candle, and with your permission, I'd like to study it more closely, Harry explained. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see Maester Crescent eye him suspiciously. If that be your wish, then it is granted. You may visit Dragonstone at your leisure to study this glass candle. Thank you, Lord Baratheon. Harry bowed, giddy at the fact that Stannis agreed without asking too many questions. Under the cover of studying the glass candles, he just secured indefinite access to Dragonstone. This gave him access to the Dragonmont, and he could further run his little religious experiment on the island without much fuss. All in all, it has been quite a successful journey so far. Wonder what's happening in Avalon. I hope they made some significant progress with the roads, Harry mused. But what he didn't realize at the time was his interventions in the Dragonmont's natural magic had certain unforeseen effects.